Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast, Run to Remember, supporting Pete and Hands Across the Water. Today, we are very privileged to have Katrina Webb with us. Katrina is a past Paralympic, or not a past, you always are a Paralympic gold medalist.
Former.
Former gold medalist and current leadership speaker. For over two decades, you've been really transforming corporate leaders, being out there in their lounge rooms, in their corporate rooms. You've been working with elite athletes in the change rooms and changing their mindset on limiting beliefs, which really keen to hear more about. And there's a few other things, but I might actually bring some of those up as we dive into a few things. And when I was looking at your past and what you're doing now, like I'd love some of the things, to do with Nepal and Kathmandu and change of mindset and things like that. And a really big thing is you were appointed a member of the Order of Australia, which is a huge achievement. And today is a very special day because it is International Day of People with Disability. So, Katrina, welcome. It's great to be talking with you today.
Oh, great to be here, and well done on the timing of having today be the International Day of Person with Disability. It's a wonderful day to celebrate humanity and the wonderful work that hands are doing. And gosh, I'm inspired by what Pete's doing. It's incredible achievement that he's got in front of him for the next few weeks.
It certainly is. And the theme for today's International Disability Day for 2004, you probably know, but it is amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities. And obviously you speak a lot about leadership, but obviously before leadership comes, probably a change in mindset somewhere along the way. When was it that, if I could ask you, when was it that you knew that your disability was a strength as opposed to a hindrance?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It wasn't early on in my career. It took some time, in fact. So I have cerebral palsy, and I didn't know it was called cerebral palsy until I was 18. However, when I was 3, it was picked up that I had something different, and we went off and see the doctor. So it was diagnosed at the age of 3 that I'd suffered a very mild injury to my brain in utero, but it was never labelled cerebral palsy then. And it was then when I was 18 playing netball at the AIS where I got the label of having cerebral palsy. And let's talk about some statistics about disability. 4.4 million people in Australia have a disability, and 90% of disability is invisible. So I think that's really important to understand. When people see me walking around the place, I know you can only see part of me today on air, but even if you could see my full body, it would be difficult for people to see that I have cerebral palsy. And so growing up, I'm 47 now. In my school, it wasn't cool to be different in any way, and I think everyone was trying to fit in. So from age 5, I worked really hard at and I asked my parents if they could not tell anybody that I had something different about me, and when I had to go get treatment, that we weren't allowed to tell anyone. So from age 5, I made this rule around covering it up and hiding it, because I ideally wanted to be the same as everybody else. So, in some ways, when I look back on that, because I was trying to cover it up, and also, Anthony, what I was trying to do is prove to people that I wasn't broken. And it's something that when I've had conversations with people with a disability, depending on the stereotype and how people see disability, from the past, we've often seen as less of, or that we need to be fixed. You're something that we need to fix. And so you kind of grow up with this belief that you're not good enough and you're broken. So then I worked incredibly hard to cover up my disability, but prove to people that I wasn't broken. In fact, I wanted to show people that I was extraordinary. And I was born into a talented sporting family. And so sport was compulsory in our family, and I love sport. And so I learned to do things extra from a very young age, because I just needed to learn how my body, I just needed a bit more time to work out how I could do it. And so when I compared myself to my peers in the early years, I would do a lot more training than them. and that paid off. I started getting best player, when I was playing netball and got picked in regional teams and state teams. And so, it wasn't until I got to the AIS in 1995 and then found out that what I had was cerebral palsy that I realized that having cerebral palsy means that you're eligible for the Paralympic Games. That was a huge change. And deciding to become a Paralympian, I then had to let people know that I had a disability, where for the 18 years before that, I was doing my best, absolute best to cover it up. And so this was the first step. And the incredible step that I was introduced to Paralympic sport. And then,
Katrina, if I could ask you, when you decided to become, or ideally would like to try out for the Paralympics, what were your parents? How were your parents? Were they supportive? Because throughout your life you were told to really close it down.
Yeah, and that was me driving that too. So that was me saying, please don't tell anyone. I remember asking my parents, can we just keep it our family secret? And they said yes.
Yeah.
And they were excellent parents. They never wrapped me up in cotton wool. They made me I have a brother and sister, and they made me do everything just like they would. And sometimes it was humiliating, and other times I found that I was good at things. And so when I found out what I had was cerebral palsy, they were quite shocked as well, because they were never told that term. And particularly in the year of 1995, there was a lot of stigma associated still with disability, even the term cerebral palsy. There was national organisations called Crippled Children's Association and the Spastic Centre that were government funded and doing a great job. And that's where you would have to go to have physio or OT or speech. I mean, this just gives you a context of where we were in society. And so my parents found out it was called cerebral palsy. They were quite surprised, because no one had ever used that term with them. And it was a big deal. Like, here I was as an able-bodied netballer, and then I found out that I had cerebral palsy. Then I found out that, if I got classified, and I did, and I was eligible, that I could go to Paralympic Games. It was a lot for all of us. Like, it was a lot for my parents. Like, they started receiving phone calls from their friends, because there was a national article in the paper that said star netballer has cerebral palsy. And most people listening have probably heard of cerebral palsy, because every 15 hours in Australia a baby's born with it. But when I ask audiences, can anyone tell me what it actually is, most people can't. So I think my parents' friends were ringing up to say sorry, because they didn't know what that meant. They didn't know whether I'd get progressively worse, or, what it was going to look like. So it was a shock for all of us. And it was, a thing that we all had to embrace. And, within a year of being an able-bodied netballer, at the age of 18, I made the decision to go to the Paralympics. So I went from able-bodied sport to parasport. I went from team sport to the sport of athletics and sprinting. And, I won
In
gold.
12 months, right? It was 12 months. And
yeah. Yeah, and I won two gold and a silver at my first games, when I got to compete against women like me, like on a level playing field. And it still didn't happen then, Anthony, like in terms of acceptance. It actually probably was, gosh, I reckon it was even maybe after the Sydney Games. It took time. It takes a long time to unlearn patterns that you have in your brain about maybe not being good enough, not being broken. And when you're born into a medical model that says we need to fix disability, we need to look at what your weaknesses are, and we need to get you functional, you're certainly not born into a mindset of let's celebrate everything that you can do, and let's help you be your best. It wasn't. It's still not. Disability is getting better. They're starting to work off of a strengths-based model, but it was probably
being in that elite athlete arena, both training in Australia, but then obviously going to the Olympics in '96, and then again in 2000, and then 2004. Was this conversation had with other Paralympians, or and then there's the non-athlete, and that probably came for you after your career, elite sporting career.
Yeah, look, that becoming a part of the Paralympic movement really helped me to understand humanity, and there are so many different disabilities out there, and disability is humanity. And I think that's really important to understand, that we are all human and we all have differences, and we just need to see more disability. So that was the first step that really helped me to, I had dinner with two of my Paralympic friends last night, and I took my 17-year-old son with me, and we left and said, Mum, I haven't seen you laugh that much with friends for a long, like I have great friends, but my Paralympic friends, we just have such great fun because we came through an era together where we really had to prove to Australia that we weren't in the medical model, we weren't rehabbing, we were elite athletes. And we also learned to have fun and probably use the strength of humour to really get through some of those hard times to be seen as elite athletes. And Anthony, what the biggest thing that helped me to accept my disability, it's not that I didn't want to accept it, I just didn't have the tools in my kit. Like no one had role modeled, I hadn't seen an athlete like me. I hadn't heard a story or was given tools that helped me to go, oh, there's a different way. Except when I got to the elite level of sport and started winning gold, I had, a great team of people, including psychologists, that really helped me to, take these winning edge skills to win gold on the track. In fact, they were the skills I needed to actually realize that it's awesome to be different. If I had thoughts about not being good enough on the track, I've won gold, I've lost, I've won silver for 8 years, and I'm getting older, and those athletes out there are younger, and that's the self-talk that you have as athletes. I learned how to realize when that had come up, and I learned how to, neutralize it and just let it go and not let it affect my performance. And that was similar when I had thoughts that would say things like, oh, you've got cerebral palsy, people won't like you, you're not good enough, you're broken. I could take those same tools in a different context, but let them go and replace them with really positive, enhancing thoughts. And so when I had those tools finally in my kit, that's when I realized that I could take, my whole self everywhere I went. And that's where I realized that my disability was my point of difference, and the strengths that I developed because of having cerebral palsy, that was the difference. It was my work ethic, it was my problem solving, it's my ability to see difference and beauty in others, that if I didn't have cerebral palsy, I wouldn't have these great strengths that the world needs, particularly in a leadership space.
Yeah, I love how you say, the points of difference should be celebrated, and, to be different is a gift. And, if every single person, whether or not you're diagnosed with a disability or not, every person's different, and it's that mindset, how to look at it. Are you broken? Am I broken? Everyone's been broken in some way. They've fallen and they've, sort of thing, or they've injured their mind through life and events. But something that you are truly passionate about and quite strong on is the power of the mind. Could you tell us a little bit more? At what stage did you decide to really share your gift and empower other people in your alchemy and the mind? And was it when you're an elite athlete? Was it when you after it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I realized that there was a gift that sport had given me, and that was a psychologist. From even my early netball days, age 14, I first had a psychologist in my team. And if you think about being 14 and you get introduced to a psychologist in your sport to be your best and to lead your mental performance, it's a very different conversation than if you're 14 and introduced to a psychologist, which generally still is in society, when you're worn out, burnt out, stressed out, grieving or suffering major trauma, and very much needed, and very much needed. But what a gift I was given to have a psychologist in my team as an athlete. So I used, and not all athletes use psychologists. I embraced it. I knew that that's probably where I could get the edge, was actually dealing with my own self. And before I had some good, psychological skills in my kit, I didn't need anyone to sabotage me because I was very good at doing it myself. And so, to have someone in my team to be able to get me to think about my thinking, try different strategies, to notice when my thinking wasn't helpful and not, was actually my saboteur instead of my, cheerleader, to be able to realize that you're not your thinking, that it's just a part of you, that if you can notice you're thinking, there's a person inside that's you, and that you get to choose which thoughts you want to work with, and how to turn them up and turn them down.
Yeah. What sort of tools can we use,
Yeah.
both, during sport or running, or swimming or cycling or whatever it might be, but also just in corporate life and in day-to-day life? What tools are there, and how can we notice those and bring them about?
Well, I think that's the first step. And I mean, most people might understand this, but I'm still surprised how many people don't. And I remember understanding it and feeling like it was liberating, that I'm not my thoughts. And actually, and even my feelings, like I can observe them, but if I'm observing them, they're not me. And that's the first principle, to understand that, yes, I'm having those, they're Katrina Webb's thoughts. But if you see them as merely words or sentences, and firstly believe them all, because I'm sure you're like me, Anthony, and the people watching this, you can make up stuff that's not true. We fall into what are called cognitive traps and thinking traps. We love to jump to conclusions. Our minds love to think all day long, and we actually can be inaccurate with our thinking, and we can make stuff up, which can cause, performance problems, relationship problems. So understanding that just because we think doesn't mean it's true, and doesn't mean that it's always going to help us. And that's the first step. And the second step for me that is really helpful, and when I was an athlete, it wasn't called mindfulness. We used it. We probably use the language of being in the now and being in the moment. And so, when I'd go to training, I never got to be a professional athlete. So I was always juggling work and study and training and, family life as that progressed, that we really had to learn to be where we were, which was such a skill that, even if you were at training and your mind started to wander off into work or study, that you then had to notice that you'd wandered off and go, it's not time to think about work or study right now. I'm at training and I need to be present in my training. So as soon as you notice your mind had wandered off, you just brought yourself back to the moment. And that's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is an absolute skill that needs to be practiced, where you can be where you are, and be present where you are. And if your thoughts wander off, you don't judge them. You don't have a conversation with them. You just go, oh, I've wandered off again, because this is what we do. We wander off. We think we've got control of our thinking, but we wander off a lot, right? And then you just unhook yourself. You go, oh, gee, it's like I see my own thoughts, or they're like a fishing. It's like a fishing rod, and I'm looking for things to just think about and wander off with, and then you get into something good, and the hook goes into the fish, and all of a sudden you realize that you're distracted. So I love that analogy. Getting the hook,
I guess,
and coming back to the present.
okay. Yeah, I like that as well. And I guess, for kids at school, they're told, stop daydreaming. But daydreaming's different to going that negative path, right?
Daydreaming is great, yeah, and there are other, like looking up is really important. There's other great things that you can do. In fact, there's a great report that a friend of mine wrote called Looking Up. And if you Google that or look up Looking Up by Dr. Fiona Kerr, there is great things about thinking in there that we need to make time for. And she does talk about mindfulness. But this is when we're trying to, like I had someone on Friday, I was running a 2-hour leadership workshop in Adelaide with an organisation, and he was explaining to me how he was feeling guilty. He's got 3 young kids and he's got a great job at work. And when he's at work, he's feeling guilty for not being at home. Then when he's at home, he's feeling guilty for not working. And he just said to me, I just don't feel like I'm doing each one enough, because I care about them both. And I just said to him, what you're going to have to learn to do is be where you are. Like if you're at home trying to be with your kids and you're at work, then you're not being with your kids. And even if it's just for a good 15 minutes of like you're in, but that takes practice. Like people have got to realize that being in the moment is a craft and a skill. And if you don't practice it every day you can find your way of doing it. Once you can practice it through mindful walking or mindful exercise. You could have a mindful shower, mindfully eating. You can do mindful breathing. There's so many different ways that you can do it, but that is the skill that you need to firstly be able to observe your thinking. And then if your thinking's not working for you, that's when you want to be able to, unhook and get out and come back to the present moment. So
Yeah.
that's the second step, and that's a game changer, because then you realize that you've got this ability to drive, where you want to go.
And
Yeah.
it's very different to a lot of people might be thinking, oh, meditation. This is not meditation. This is just bringing yourself back
Yeah.
into the present. And I think, you having kids, and I've got kids as well. And I think the as a suggestion, like a starting point to practice this is like literally be present with your kids, get down eyeball to eyeball, or, that 5 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes to be 100% present to them, it changes your life.
It's a great gift, isn't it? And that might be too much, even you might go, oh, 5 minutes. Maybe just start with 30 seconds. Like, we got to
Yeah.
start where we're at.
Yeah.
Because if we haven't, people often say to me, oh, I'm too busy to do that. And I'm like, actually, you're the one that needs to.
Yeah.
It's this craft of being able to slow down your thinking, and you perform so much better, because if you get on autopilot, which is probably what we're talking about, where you don't slow down, you just have a thought and you react. You have another thought and you react. So what we're teaching people to do is, when you have a thought, if it's working for you, then that's okay. Most of the time we do function well, but it's those times where we might have it fall into a thinking trap. We might be, having some tension, or relationship problems, or not getting the best out of ourselves. And that's the time where we need to go, actually, I need to slow down and really look at my thinking, and making sure that I'm not making up stuff, I'm not falling into some traps, that I actually can keep myself on the right course.
And how did you prepare for competition? Like, is it similar to how you suggest and advise and coach and teach people to prepare for a new job, or a new,
Yeah.
just a tough day at the office, or preparation? Like, is there a synergy there between professional competition and life?
Yeah. Well, I think the next extension to that is, and I'm just imagining Pete running right now as well, and I've had moments like this too, if I've gone for a jog. This is post my career. And then you get this thought pattern going, oh, this is all too hard. My body's hurting, I'm tired. Or you get to a hill and you're like, I've had a really hard week. And you start to find ways, a story to tell, so you can stop.
Yeah.
And I notice those moments when it happens to me, and like, there's a difference between, if I've had a really hard week, I will maybe not go for a run, because sometimes that will be the thing that pushes me over. I might be better off
Yeah.
doing yin yoga, or a really nice yoga nidra, which is an incredible deep rest activity where you lay down for 30 minutes, eyes closed, and listen to the yoga teacher. And you don't even move your body. So when people say to me, I can't do yoga, I'm not interested in yoga, yoga has incredible evidence to support mental health, well-being, and performance. And it's the most inclusive activity I've ever done. But if you're on that run and you go, actually, no, I want to keep going, that's when you notice that your mind's telling you, unhelpful thoughts. So what I do in those moments is anchor back into my body and go, okay, I've noticed I've had those thoughts, come back into my body. Am I utilizing my glutes enough? Because they're the biggest muscles when we're running up hills. Are my arms, am I utilizing them? Can I run them a bit faster? What are my shoulders doing? How's my breathing? So you become what we call mindful in your body. And all of a sudden you're at the top of the hill, because you were present in your body, and you go, oh gosh, I just got up that hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And however, so you see the difference when you get stuck in that story that I'm too tired. If you listen to that, then you react and give up. When you're able to notice that happens and go, yeah, okay, I am tired, but what else can I do to be present in the moment in my body? And then you focus on your body, and then all of a sudden you're at the top of the hill and you go, wow, our mind is incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
And
I think that's an amazing last 30 seconds that you shared there. And for Pete, because he will listen to this when
yeah,
he is running, and other people are listening to this when they're jogging or doing something, just rewind the last 30 seconds and just listen to that again.
that's it. And it can be the body, or it can be, if Pete's running, like, I'm just thinking of the environment, the terrain he's running in. It's like be present in nature. What can you know, tap into your five senses? What can you see but smell and feel and hear? And, you know, like that, maybe, you know, you might be able to taste the salt that you're producing. But yeah, since I've retired as an athlete, and, you know, we did spend a lot of time doing that, you know, like be in the moment, get in the present. And then I've gone on to study a lot now since I spent a lot of time in Nepal with, I have a Buddhist teacher that has taught me a lot, but I've also gone and studied a lot of evidence-based tools that I actually learned as an athlete that now I can take and teach in the corporate space.
So you go over to Nepal once a year, oh no, twice. I think you're going there twice
Yeah.
next year. Is that right?
Yeah, it depends. I've been there for 7 weeks this year already. And yeah, I run programs across there, and I'll be over there again twice next year. So it's become my second home. Probably like, you know, Pete and Claire and Hans in Thailand.
Ireland, yeah.
I never thought about Nepal, to be honest, when I was an athlete. And my husband had this dream of, you know, trekking Everest, and when we met, I'm like, oh, that sounds nice. And I've my career of winning gold and being a part of different programs and meeting different people. I got an invitation to go to Nepal 11 years ago, and I fell in love with it. And I have been back 16 times in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And those are those moments where you have no idea and that are going to happen. And I realized this year that I knew my husband hadn't been. We've got 3 sons, and some people appreciate, as you have children, it can be harder to travel for work and travel together as a couple. And I just thought this year I've got to make it a priority that my whole family goes with me. It was actually something on my bucket list that, you know, if I die tomorrow, which we're all dying, and I'm not afraid of thinking about this, that what's on my list and what would I like to make sure that I pay forward and pass on to my 3 boys and even my husband. And I just said to my husband, it's urgent that we do it ASAP. You know, time and money is always going to be an issue. Always, like you're always going to find an excuse. How do we make this happen? And I love working with individuals to ask those questions as well, because maybe it's because I, you know, have seen a lot of disability. I've seen a lot of people's lives be changed. Even when I was studying physio, I saw a lot of tragedy, and maybe I really appreciate that you've just got to make use of where you are in life, and don't wait till you retire, because I know you don't have your health then. Like, how do you live like you're retiring every day, which is a really nice way to live.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I was fortunate enough to spend a few weeks over in Nepal around 10 years ago. And yeah, absolute magical place that I, I can literally remember so many moments now, just like a slide, quick, you know, in and out, and even the humidity or the freshness up in the mountains and the change of the environment, the people, the smiles, the dogs, you know, absolutely everything that was, and no more time than just really being part of like Earth kind of thing, you know, and hearing a small landslide. It was probably about a kilometer away, but it felt like it was about 50 meters away, and just, you know, just really being part of Earth. It's a beautiful place.
That's a really beautiful description. It is. People say to me, what is it for you? And I'm like, well, it's that. It's, I mean, when you're surrounded by the world's biggest mountains, you're connected to something that's hard to describe.
Yeah.
To nature. For me, it's the mysticism as well. I love that spirituality is everywhere. Like, you can't, I feel like in Australia, you know, through religion, it's in churches or mosques, or it's behind things.
Yes.
First Nations people have really helped me to understand my spirituality is connected through nature here in Australia. And I have a deep connection to country and how much nature keeps my spirit alive. But there's also, Nepal's never been invaded. Like, I think this is really a beautiful thing too, to have a country that still doesn't have colonialism. It's pure. And like you mentioned, the dogs, like this philosophy that they're not allowed to kill any animals, like that they live in a place that everyone has the right to live. And so there's just these beautiful principles that, yeah, I really enjoy.
It's so true. Like if I could share one sort of time when we were out there, we did the Annapurna track and another one at the same time. And I think on day 3 there was a dog with a very large wound on its hind back leg. It was a massive chunk out of it. I don't know what, something happened, but that dog stayed with us for the next 2 weeks, and we treated it. We gave it antiseptic. We got everything, and it was healed. It was incredible. Just and everyone, gave it food, and there was a lot of care given
Yeah.
towards it, which was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah,
It really was.
so really, I encourage people to go if they've never been before. I often say to people, like, I've designed my life to go a couple of times every year through the work that I do, but it's actually my medicine if I look at how I'm leading myself. Spending time there every year, I get this beautiful medicine to keep my spirit going for the rest of the year. And one of the things I've learned through my journey is, being a Paralympian and being successful and winning gold medals, I didn't realize the gift that would pay forward to me. My dear friend who is my business partner in Nepal, he said to me recently, do you know your gold medal was the first ever Paralympic Olympic medal that came into Nepal?
Wow.
And I
Is that
didn't.
right?
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
invited me to go there to have conversations around disability and really to try and help open people's eyes, because in some parts of developing countries they still see disability as a curse, or so really using my visit there to help educate people, and it's been such a beautiful gift. And then I come home and I go, well, that's really nice that I get to experience that, but how can I share these wonderful human beings with others? Like it's beautiful for me, but how can I share beautiful people with the world? And that's one of the reasons why I came up with my New Day Leadership Company, and we've just held our 8th summit. And just sharing beautiful people who lead, how I call it, lead for the greater good of the people and the planet, and just have great stories. And share them. So I've flown about 4 people from Nepal out to come and, share them in my city of Adelaide, and share good people with good people. And Pete Baines, he spoke at my conference a few years back, gosh, just out of COVID. So we had to have him on Zoom because we were all in lockdown still.
Yeah, gosh.
But to share his incredible story, and I know, Pete, if you're listening to this and running, to share the impact that you had out into the whole of Adelaide and inspire people to really lead, for others in the environment. He had a real impact on people in Adelaide.
Oh yeah. And what you're doing too, like I have this image now of this of triangle, and you have experienced three areas of this, and it's kind of like the Olympics in your actions, and Nepal with your mind, and then United Nations you spoke, and it was about your words, and this is why you're like in effect this mastery of these 3 areas or 3 pillars of the body, mind, and voice. So tell us, when you went to the United Nations, what was that like?
Can you just draw that model up for me afterwards, Anthony?
Yeah.
I love hearing. Thank you. That was a beautiful description. I really like that. And I love meeting
You
people
can
like,
use it. That can be a keynote speaker.
yeah, that's right. And it's great. And this is why we need to meet and spend time with other people, of how other people join dots for you. The UN was incredible. It was an amazing experience, and in fact, I can share this story because I was on the Gold Coast on Saturday night, co-emceeing the Paralympian of the Year dinner, and one of our presidents throughout the time that I was involved, he was an incredible supporter of mine and provided some great opportunities. And he got awarded into the Hall of Fame on Saturday night. So it was really nice to interview him. And And those moments, you know, for me of going to speak at the United Nations, the International Paralympic Committee at the time were looking for someone in our Oceania region and a woman to speak on their behalf. And so this person who got the award on Saturday night, he put my name forward. And one of the reasons why he put my name forward, and I suppose this is how I work, Anthony, is I moved to Canberra to train for Commonwealth Games in 2006. I went back to the AIS on a full scholarship again, not as a netballer, this time as a athletics, Paralympic athlete. And I was working for Paralympics Australia at the time, and Greg, who was the president of our movement, lived there. And so I rang him and said, you know, I'm here for a year, Greg. I'd love to go have lunch with you and just learn from you and just hear your vision. And I remember doing that, and that just felt what you would do, right? And when we had lunch, he said to me, Katrina, this is amazing. Not many athletes have done this. And I went, oh, that's interesting. And it wasn't me asking for anything. It was actually me wanting to learn from his incredible acumen and see whether I could help in any way. And I've realized that skill has been one that has opened many doors, because in doing that, when he felt who I was as a leader and what I was doing and what I cared about, when he needed to put someone forward to speak at the UN, he thought of me. And so I often share that story with people in business or athletes, saying, you know, and my Buddhist teacher talks about generosity. What is generosity? What is pure generosity? Is when you can give without expecting anything in return. And he talks about it to me in money. He'll say, could you give $1 without expecting anything in return? Probably. But it's like, at what point is it $500 where you expect something back? Like, you know, I know Pete's raising money now. Like, what is the pure generosity? For some people, it could be 1,000, but there's a point where you give, where you expect something in return.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting in a financial point of view. But when you can actually meet with someone really just to get to know them without expecting anything, that has been one skill that's got me a long way in life, because and you can't
That's a
fake
good
that.
challenge. That's a
Yeah,
real good challenge to put out there to people, you know, try to do that just without
connect.
any expectation of anything return. And I think the return, unbeknownst to them, will be an incredible feeling of just a weird feeling for a lot of people. Like, wow.
Yeah. And it's got to be pure, right? That, like, so it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. And so when Greg rang me and said, Katrina, I've got something to ask you. How would you like to go to the UN in New York and speak on behalf of the International Paralympic Committee next
Yeah.
month? I was just blown away. It was incredible. It was like I only got to speak for 6 or 7 minutes, but there was 4 athletes from around the world chosen. And why were we there? Because 2005 was called the Year of Sport and Physical Activity for the UN, and they pick a theme and they use that theme to promote peace, development, health, and education around the world. So there was about 1,000 people at this closing ceremony, and all of the sports ministers from across the world had brought their report in and handed it to Kofi Annan and said, "This is what we've done through the power of sport in our country." And so my brief was to talk a bit about my experience, and also to tell the world, and I'm so proud of this moment, speaking about today, the day it is, that for everyone, when they're putting their sporting plans together, that they had to think about making sure that everyone had the right to participate and play or perform in sport.
Yeah.
And you know, to really, because it's still not happening. I mean, we're getting things better in Australia, but we need to really keep challenging the system to make sure that everyone, like if we design for everyone everywhere all the time, no matter what differing needs people have, then that's how we live in an inclusive society. But we've still got a long way to go, sadly.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's incredible, you know, to do that. And it would have been, um, what was the difference between ask that to
Yeah.
speak over in the UN and when you were told that you were going to carry the flame into the Sydney Olympic Stadium in the year 2000? Like, what was so
Yeah.
one that, and then I guess the next question I want to ask you is, you know, it's just, you know, what's it like in Nepal in that peaceful place? And then was that the biggest roar of a crowd that you've ever heard when you ran in with that torch?
Oh gosh, look, UN, I was probably, and that was a big deal to talk for 7 minutes at the UN.
Yeah,
And I loved it. I remember someone, I can't remember who it was, but Roger Federer was there. There were some amazing athletes there, and I got to meet the guys from Cool Runnings. Like I got to meet so many good people.
yeah.
Siri Tremoy was there. The runner, the Run for Peace, incredible story. And someone came up to me afterwards and said to me, "Oh, you did a really good job. You've actually really challenged or changed my belief that athletes can speak." And I just went, "Oh."
Wow.
They thought that athletes, can share their story as an athlete. But I suppose what I shared was so much more. It was more about being human, and that was really nice feedback. And so, I love the UN experience, the torch experience. Gosh, that was unique in itself. I only found out I was in the Sydney Village, so we were already in there as athletes. And
Yeah.
my parents weren't coming to the opening ceremony because my cousin got married on that day,
Oh,
out of all days.
oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, and I had no one coming to the opening ceremony. Even my partner at the time, who's now my husband, he wasn't coming. He's an Olympian as well, and he'd been to the Sydney Games. So it sounds like no one, really cared about coming, but they were all my engagements. And then I found out that I was carrying the torch in. They came across and said, "We've got something to talk to you about." And they told me that you and the other people, there was 5 of us, got to do it. But we weren't allowed to tell anybody. And we had to go and do a rehearsal. And I
Oh,
said to
wow.
our president at the time, "I've got nobody coming," and it was sold out. And so they managed to get a ticket for my husband, which was amazing. So there was someone there, but I had to tell my parents, just keep watching. When you watch the team parade out,
Yeah,
that often if you don't see your family members, you could switch off a bit, and then just because it turns into a bit of a concert. And I just had to say to them, "Can you just keep watching?" But I couldn't tell them why. And then when
yeah.
they what I did, oh look,
Oh,
this,
you certainly were, and I actually
yeah,
watched that little
yeah,
clip. So you should YouTube it, and the announcement as you were
oh,
the first to come in, and it's
all right.
yeah. If they miss that, shame on them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I use it a lot now to introduce myself, like as a keynote speaker, because it's the best introduction, right? Like
Oh,
this massive stadium, then that says, and to bring the torch into the stadium is
yeah,
Katrina Webb. So, like, if I'm about to keynote, like it's just a stunning. And I spoke at a client's event recently, and their theme was sport, and everyone had to dress up as a sports star. So I went that extra step further and bought my torch out hadn't come out the cupboard forever. And I got
yeah.
in my, sporting gear and actually timed it and walked up on stage with the torch. And yeah, it was good fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I reckon you should, yeah, definitely bring that along. That's a great thing.
Oh,
Well, just before we go, there was something that really stood out, and something that I, um, particularly for the last 20 years, I say it quite a lot, and something that you say is why not instead of why me, and why I relate to that is John Lennon actually did two artworks, and I'm fortunate enough to have 2 of those, which are limited, and it's actually why me, why not? And I quite often say that, why me? If you're asking yourself why me, just always just why not?
not me. Totally. And I know it's linked to my humility in that as well, because and I love my humility. I think it's one of my powerful strengths as a leader that still gives me incredible opportunities. But I've also realized that our strengths, if we're too humble, no one will see us. Or we even go, "Well, why would they choose me? There's so many better people than me." But if you combine visibility and humility together,
Mm,
but with to a point where where humility has its best, if I say golden mean, like, where you get the right balance of it, with the right balance of visibility, because you can be humble, but if no one knows you exist and you're waiting for people to to find out about you, you're going to be waiting a long time. So it's that beautiful, I see that beautiful infinity sign, and so humility is there and visibility is there. And it's about this dance where you get the right amount at the right time, authentically in leadership, that people go, oh, I like what you're about. They might not be able to understand that, but when you can understand yourself. And so it's, you know, and I suppose for me, I've had these moments, and it's not just been once off. Like, I couldn't apply for the carrying the torch into the stadium. That's a phone call that you get. I couldn't apply to speak at the UN. That's a phone call you get. I couldn't write to Nepal. Well, I probably could have, but I got a beautiful invitation because I met somebody that said, "Can you come?" They invited me to go there, and when it's happened to me a few times, I am a deep thinker, and I like to think about, well, why me? What is it about me? Why do they want me in their team? Why am I getting these opportunities?
Because you're living life. Like you're
Yeah,
putting yourself out there, and you're in the moment, and you're absorbing, those
that's
around you, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's about what are the qualities. And I think it's really nice when you can go, oh, and when you asked me that question right at the beginning, what was it? And for me, it was when I finally had the tools in my kit to be me. And you'll hear people say this, taking your whole self.
Yes.
I know what that means because I didn't for a long time. And I know how exhausting it is to leave parts of yourself behind, or hide them, or cover them up. And I remember at 18, when I was trying to make a decision about going to the Paralympics, I remember that was the question that actually encouraged me to go, because I remember asking myself this question. I said to myself, why do I hate being different so much? And I really did hate it. And I thought, this isn't helping me. Like, this is hard work, and I'm exhausted of trying to cover up my disability. If I go to a Paralympics, I will learn to be the best athlete I still can be. And if I go to a sport like athletics, no coach can tell me I'm not good enough, because there's an objective measure to get in the team. But if I become a Paralympian, I want to, be on a podcast with you on International Day for People with Disability, to tell, to be able to tell you that I have cerebral palsy without any guilt or any, and I can today. Like, it's been a gift and an asset to me. And but I remember when I was thinking about that, if I can become an incredibly proud Paralympian, then one day maybe I can pay that forward to somebody else. And once I said that as an 18-year-old, my value of, I don't know whether it's compassion or love or kindness or service, it's all of that. That's my number one drive. If I can pay forward something to help someone be better, then I'm in. And I knew going to the Paralympics wasn't going to be easy. It was back in 1995. I didn't even know about it. And I knew that I had a big job ahead of me. And I knew people would look at me going, and some people have done this, and I still don't know how to answer it. They'll say to me, oh, but you don't look disabled enough.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and this is why people should not judge a book by its cover.
Totally.
There's so much going on, both physically and mentally, all the time with people
Well,
in their present time.
and 90% of disability is invisible. So in fact, I'm classic of what disability looks like. And so that paying forward was the thing I really was looking for. And, and I've had numerous stories over the years that I've felt that. And, speaking at the UN was amazing. Winning gold was amazing. Carrying the torch, trekking to Everest Base Camp twice. I've been doing these big things and extraordinary things. And I think it's because I've been trying to match that feeling of winning gold. Like, when you win gold, it's such a unique feeling that you want it again. And so I haven't been an athlete for a long time, but I'm trying to do these things to get that again. And do you know
Katrina, if I could share with you someone who has not won a gold, and why us other mortals, do these things. It's really just to live, and to we don't know that we're admire their culture yet, because we haven't experienced this. We don't know, truly what we're going to get out of it. But it's more, say yes to
Yeah,
these things. And
that's
I really, it's great that you share that, because that is a challenge for elite athletes, after, to get that high again.
Well,
But
and
it's
that's
more about life.
and you're validated on it. Like it's the high,
Yeah.
it's the adrenaline, but society validates you. And then when you retire, no one calls you anymore. Like it's actually very similar to retiring in
Mm.
later on in career. It's a big shift. But the bit that made the difference for me and keeps me doing what I do every day is the beautiful stories of when you're, a few years ago, I was teaching some resilient skills to a great audience at the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute. And if I'm teaching skills, I'll, say I'm Katrina Webb. I will share that I'm a Paralympic athlete, and then I'll tell people I have cerebral palsy, because I know if I don't, they'll keep watching me for the next, hour trying to work out why. But I also share it because it's me. It's Katrina Webb. And so then I go on to teaching resilience skills. And this particular session, the next break, there was a teacher in the audience, and she came up to me and she said to me, "Thank you so much for sharing that you have cerebral palsy, because I've got a young girl in my class that has cerebral palsy and she looks very similar to you right now." And she was
Yeah.
in year 2. And then she went on to tell me that she was angry and frustrated and embarrassed. And she asked me if I could write a little note to this young girl so then she could give it to her next week at school. And I said, of course. And I didn't just write a little note, I actually wrote a 3-page letter to this young girl. And this
Yeah.
teacher was stunning. She got my letter and bought this big IKEA frame and then got photos of me on the internet. And then I went a step further and I said, if we get her parents' permission, I'd love to come and meet this young girl and present this, and also bring my medals in and share a Paralympic story. And her dad was a teacher at the school, and I went and did it. And there's a photo of us two afterwards. And if you could see this young girl's face, this smile on her face,
Oh,
and I don't even have to say anything in that time, because if I was in year 2 and I met someone like me, to see that is humanity, that
oh,
like, and the letter I got from her parents was one of the most beautiful thing I've ever received in my life. And as a parent now, that feeling transcends gold.
oh,
And
I got
yeah,
goosebumps now just hearing it and seeing
yeah,
the, she would have cried with joy. There's nothing better to see a child cry
yeah.
through joy.
And that's the story I pass on to people now. You don't have to be a gold medalist. I'm not. But if we're leading people, we're leading ourselves. We don't have to be in a corporate position. We're all leading. Because what I've learned
Yeah.
through the extra training that I've done is you pay forward how you take care of yourself. You pay forward whether you like it or not. So if
Yes.
you have really good mental health and well-being and performance skills, that's what you pay forward. Because if you can stay connected in tough times and and connected to who you stand for, that's what you pay forward. And people see that. But if you're someone that, loses it when it's tough and say things and do things that you're not proud of and you have to redo afterwards, you also pay that forward. And so we all have this opportunity to change someone else's life. And yes, I know I won gold, but at the end of the day, I had cerebral palsy. And someone else saw that I had cerebral palsy. And that was the bit that made the change, which that gets me up every day. That gets me working every day. And I don't have that aspiration to look for a gold performance, because
Yeah.
that is what life is about, is helping someone else. And to see what Pete and what you're doing, like this is why it's so easy for me to say yes, because Pete and Claire and the team and you all get it. This is why we do what we do. And when you realize that in life, that's the best gift.
It truly is. And Katrina, how can, the listeners hear more of you, experience, potentially Nepal or other activities, and whether it be physical or mindfulness and leadership? How can
Yeah,
they
awesome.
get in contact with you?
Yeah, if you type my name in, Katrina Webb, in search on the internet, my website will come up, and you can find out all the information there, or follow me on a few socials, different platforms.
Yep. And last message for Pete, who definitely will be listening to this. And one message I'm going to say to Pete, because you reminded me of it, is put your head up, Pete, look around, and, look forward. I know you're sucking in the big ones, mate, but look up and just, everyone else is not there, and you're doing it, you're making the change. So Katrina, have you got a message for Pete?
Yeah. Oh, and Pete, I'm just so incredibly proud of you to be doing what an amazing challenge, but doing it for the greater good is why, and I totally get that. And it'll be tough. There'll be days where it'll be tough. And my biggest tip will be, when your thoughts start to derail you, is notice them and go, I know your mind's just wanting to protect you and wanting to say you've had enough, you've had enough. But just do the unhooking and come back into your body and think about, are you using your glutes enough? Maybe your calves, can you push through your big toes a bit more? Or how are your arms, all that information about being a good runner. Are you utilizing your body enough and anchoring your body, and that'll keep you going.
Awesome message, Katrina. I really appreciate you sharing your little snippets of euphoria and some of the challenges that you had, and sharing really on a personal level. I encourage those to share this podcast, and to young athletes or people that feel as if or they know they're different, yet are they really different, and they can use that to empower themselves, empower the group around them, and who knows, be a leader, speak at the overseas, potentially at United Nations, and go on to many other things. And you're super young, Katrina, so I know you're going to share so much in the future. You got 3 young boys who you're leading, and a husband. You've probably got 4 boys, you say. So for those that want to support Pete and Hands Across the Water, just jump over to Hands Across the Water, and or Google Run to Remember. Super privileged to have Katrina with us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.